They say every small town has a secret, but the one I grew up in wasn't he just hiding something. It was actively trying to bury it, and failing miserably. Because no matter how many times the dirt was packed down or how many flowers were planted on top, the grave at the back edge of Blackthorn Cemetery never stayed buried, and the older folks pretended it was just vandalism or stray dogs. But even as a kid, I could feel something wrong in the air whenever we rode past that place on our bikes. So when I came back as an adult, after nearly 15 years away, I didn't expect to find that same open patch of earth staring back at me like an old wound that refused to heal. Yet there it was, the soil still unsettled, like something inside had been pushing upward for years, and people still wouldn't talk about it. Especially my mother, who told me, in that quiet, clipped tone she used when she was forcing herself not to panic. "Adil, that place has nothing to do with you, please. Don't go there." Which only made me more determined to see it for myself. Because grief does strange things. And coming home for the first time since my father's death had already left me feeling like everything familiar was slightly tilted, slightly dimmer, like the colors of the town had faded without him in it. And maybe that's why I ignored every warning sign. Because the night I decided to visit the grave was also the night I found his old journal hidden inside the back of his dresser, wrapped in a grocery bag like he'd been hiding it from someone. And inside it wasn't money or old photos like I expected, but dozens of handwritten entries, all circling the same name. Elias Ward. The name carved on that restless grave. The name we had all grown up afraid of, without knowing why. And reading my father's notes felt like slowly sliding into someone else's nightmare. Because he wrote about the grave reopening on its own, about finding human-sized impressions in the mud, about seeing pale fingers sticking out of the earth like they had been reaching for air. And he wrote about hearing someone speak his name from the cemetery at night. A voice that sounded like it was coming from under the dirt. A voice asking him to fix it. A voice that never should have existed. And then the entries suddenly stopped. As if he either couldn't face whatever came next or something happened to him before he could write it down. And I don't know if it was grief, curiosity, or stupidity that pushed me out the door at midnight with that journal in my pocket and a flashlight in my hand. But I remember thinking that if my father had been dealing with something real out there, if there was even the slightest chance that the thing haunting him was tied to that grave, then I had to see it for myself. Had to understand what he had been trying to warn us about. And even driving there felt wrong. The road narrowing, the trees leaning in like they were trying to block me. The wind too still for a winter night, and the cemetery looked smaller than I remembered, but somehow more crowded, like the shadows between the headstones were alive, moving, breathing. My flashlight felt useless, just a thin line of light swallowed by darkness. But I kept walking toward the back fence, toward the grave everyone tried to pretend didn't exist. And the moment I stepped near it, I felt the air shift on colder, but heavier, like something thick had wrapped around me, and the ground under my feet felt soft. Fresh, like it had been dug up recently even though there wasn't a shovel in sight. And sure enough, the grave was open again. Not fully, but the soil was cracked, disturbed, like something underneath had been pushing, and the wooden coffin lid, if that's what it was, looked splintered, like someone had pried it open from the inside. And I should have run right then, but instead, I found myself kneeling, brushing away the loose dirt like I was uncovering a secret that had been waiting for me. And that's when I saw it. A hand, pale, thin, but not skeletal. Not decayed like it should have been after more than 80 years underground. Because Elias Ward had died in 1941, yet the hand looked freshly dead. The skin still intact, the nails still there. And for a moment I thought maybe someone had dug up a newer body and dumped it in this grave. But then the fingers twitched, just barely, like a dying reflex. And my breath caught in my throat, the air turning to ice inside my lungs, and I stumbled backward, falling on the wet soil, watching that hand slowly curl inward like it was clinging to something I couldn't see. And that's when I heard it, the same voice my father had written about, quiet, muffled, like it was coming from under layers of dirt and wood, whispering my name, saying, "Help me, you can fix it." And the voice didn't sound angry or monstrous. It sounded desperate, pleading, broken, like someone who had suffered for far too long, and against every instinct screaming at me to run. I leaned closer, listening, because something in that voice felt familiar, like a memory I couldn't place. And then I felt the ground shift beneath me, a soft ripple, traveling outward from the grave like something was moving underneath. and the soil next to the hand began to rise, bulging upward as though another part of the body was pressing against it, and I backed away, scrambling to my feet. Because the way the earth moved wasn't natural, it wasn't random, it was deliberate, purposeful. Like something buried there was trying to stand, to rise, to escape. And that's when the wind picked up suddenly, violently, ripping through the cemetery with enough force to make the trees bend and groan. And the headstones around me began to rattle, some of them shaking so hard I thought they would topple over, and the air filled with this low, humming sound, almost like chanting but distorted, layered, like multiple voices speaking at once from beneath the ground. And I realized it wasn't just this grave, several other plots near it were shifting too, the soil cracking, small mounds forming, as if the disturbance on Elias Ward's grave was spreading, waking up others who had no business stirring. And in that moment, a wave of terror hit me so hard it felt physical, like a cold hand gripping my spine, and I turned to run. The wind hammered against me like a wall, pushing me back toward the grave as the voice whispered again. Louder this time. Don't leave. You're the one who can fix it. And the sound vibrated inside my chest like it was coming from my own bones, and I don't know how long I stood frozen there, caught between fear and something darker, something pulling at my mind. But the clouds above shifted, and for a brief moment, the moonlight hit the grave directly, illuminating the carved name on the headstone, Elias Ward, and beneath it, scratched in with something sharp and recent. Asikundemi, my father is named. That was enough to snap me out of whatever trance I had been falling into, because if someone had carved his name there, recently, intentionally, then he hadn't just been watching the grave, he had been part of something connected to it. Something dangerous, something he never told us. And the thought of him being tied to whatever was reaching from the soil made my blood run cold, so I forced myself backward, step by shaky step, until the wind finally loosened its grip enough for me to turn and sprint toward the gate. And as I ran, the chanting grew louder behind me, the ground rumbling like something massive was pushing up from below. But I never looked back, not until I slammed the car door shut and sped out of the cemetery, my hands shaking so violently I could barely keep the wheel straight. And even as I drove, I could still feel that voice in the back of my mind, whispering, echoing, like it had lodged itself somewhere deep. And when I got home, my mother was waiting at the door, pale, trembling, like she already knew where I had gone. And when she saw the dirt on my clothes, she whispered, "You heard him, didn't you?" And there was no point denying it, because the look in her eyes told me she had heard the voice too, years ago, maybe long before my father ever did. And when I showed her the journal, she broke down, telling me that Elias Ward wasn't he, just some tragic figure from town history. He had been accused of murdering 2 children in 1941, lynched by the townspeople without a trial, buried in an unmarked grave until someone added a headstone decades later out of guilt. But according to her, according to my father, Elias had been innocent, framed by a man who lived in this very town, and the wrong burial, the violent death, the injustice, it had twisted something in him, trapping him between life and death. And the townspeople had spent generations trying to keep him buried, hoping the earth would hold him if they packed it down again and again. But the truth was that the ground itself rejected him, because graves can only hold the dead, not the restless, not the wronged. And when she told me the last part, when she whispered that my father had been trying to help Elias move on, that he had been close to uncovering the truth about the real killer before the voice started, calling him to the grave every night, I felt something inside me shift, because suddenly it all made sense. The late night walks, the missing hours, the fear in his voice near the end, and the question of whether he had died naturally or whether something had pulled him into that darkness. And when I asked her what happened the night he died, she hesitated, then said she had found him standing in the backyard, staring at the tree line in the direction of the cemetery, whispering to someone she couldn't see, repeating the words I'm trying over and over before he collapsed. And she had convinced herself it was a heart attack, but part of her believed something had called him too close, too deep, too far into whatever lay beneath that grave. And that night, lying in my childhood bedroom, I couldn't sleep, because every time I closed my eyes, I saw that hand twitching in the dirt, reaching, begging. And I realized that Elias Ward wasn't asking for vengeance, he was asking for truth. And truth doesn't stay buried, not even under 80 years subsoil. And maybe that's why the grave never stayed shut, why the ground kept rejecting him. Because the town had buried a lie with him. A lie that had festered until it rotted into something restless. And now that it had touched me, spoken to me, it wasn't going to stop. And even now, days later, as I sit here writing this, the dirt under my nails hasn't washed out completely. And last night, around Teresa, I heard it again. Faint but unmistakable, drifting through my window like a breath carried on the wind. Help me. You're the one who can fix it. And I don't know how much longer I can ignore it. Because part of me fears that if I don't return to that grave, something else will come looking for me. Something that refuses to stay buried. Something that has been waiting decades for the truth to finally surface. And I think it's done waiting.